Let's talk about some potential upgrades for Mishra's Burnished Banner. First, let's read our commander, Mishra, Eminent One, for 2 blue, black, red. It's a 5/4 human artificer. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of target non-creature artifact you control, except its name is Mishra's War Form, and it's a 4/4 construct artifact creature in addition to its other types. It gains haste until end of turn. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So I want to talk about some ways we can reduce the cost of our artifacts. We could do that with Enthusiastic Mechanaut, Ethereum Sculptor, and Foundry Inspector. These are all fairly cheap, all less than 50 cents, so if you're looking for a better way to ramp in this deck, these are great options, as well as Joyra's Familiar. This is going to make all historic spells you cast cost 1 less, so this is going to include Artifact, Legendaries, and Sagas. Now, since we have to sacrifice that copy at the end of our turn, you may want to look into cards like Obeka Brute Chronologist and Sundial of the Infinite. This is going to end the turn, so that way we don't lose the copy that we're making with our commander. As for some card draw in the deck, I thought about Chronomancer, Sage of Latinum, Psymaster Thopterus, and Vidalcan Archmage. Chronomancer is going to let us sacrifice another artifact. If we pay 1, tap this, and we get to draw a card. Sage of Latinum, this time we don't have to have an additional cost. We can just tap this, sacrifice an artifact, and then draw a card. We have Psymaster Thopterus. We can pay 2, sack 2 artifacts, and draw a card. Last is my favorite, which is Vidalcan Archmage. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, draw a card. If we look at the stats on the Mishra deck list, there are 42 artifacts in this deck, so we're going to be drawing a lot of cards with this one. Now, since we have to sacrifice some of our cards, it's possible to add cards like Mere Retriever. Whenever this dies, so we could end up sacrificing this, we can return another target artifact from our graveyard to our hand. There's also Baleful Strix. I really like this card because for 2 mana we get a 1/1 flying death touch creature, and when it enters the battlefield we get to draw a card. Speaking of enter the battlefield, let's talk about Reckless Fireweaver. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Reckless Fireweaver deals 1 damage to each opponent. So that means on our end step when we're making that 4/4 creature, we can deal 1 damage to each opponent, or those other 42 artifacts in the deck that we can trigger with Reckless Fireweaver. I also thought about Solemn Simulacrum. This can go in any deck. It's going to ramp us, and when it's sacrificed, or when it dies, you may draw a card. The last 2 I want to mention is Determined Iteration, which says at the beginning of combat on your turn, you get to populate, and the token created this way gains haste, and then you have to sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Since we're already making copies, this will only work on tokens, so if we're keeping those from our commander, we can keep making that token over and over again as long as we have a way to keep them with cards that can end our turn before we lose those. The last one I want to mention is Thopter Spy Network. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control an artifact, we get to create a 1/1 colorless Thopter creature token with flying. Whenever 1 or more artifact creatures deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. Thank you all so much for watching. If you want any of these cards, they'll be in the description down below. And thank you to the members who help support this show, and you can also become a member by joining this channel only for 99 cents. You help support the channel, and you get to see your name at the end of these videos. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.